I would drink this anytime.
Got a question for you.
Shoot.
Do you think, out of all the iconic reds that you can think of Spain, is Bierzo significantly different?
Yeah.
Welcome to Bierzo. This is the gateway to green Spain. And it is also just almost a part of Galicia, but it's not part of Galicia technically. The autonomous region of Galicia is just to the west. Bierzo is actually in the most northwestern part of Castilla y León. So it shares some personality with both of these areas, both Galicia and Castilla. Personally, I think of it as Galicia, very much with the food that they eat, the wines that they're making, just the lush green landscape that they have there. It's so different than Castilla y León, which is the political region that it is within, where Castilla is much more arid, much more extreme continental. Bierzo is in a valley, and it's very, very green and beautiful. So this is a very historic region, just like all the many regions of Spain, but they all have some different kind of background story. This used to be a Roman mining area. It's rich in all these like particular rocks and minerals. Slate is very common here, which we'll talk quite a bit when we talk about the soils here. You can also find granite and quartz. This is a really important thing that was mined for in this area. So Bierzo has been an important industrial part of this northern part of Spain. Another key to its history is where it sits along the path of the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. So if you've never heard of that, the Camino, which is what it's kind of normally referred to, Camino just means the path or the walk. This is an old historic pilgrimage that can start in different parts of Europe, but generally in all the way in the eastern part of Spain, or if you're really adventurous, you start in France. And it goes all the way across the northern part of Spain and ends at Santiago de Compostela, which is on the coast in Galicia. And in Santiago de Compostela, this is where we have the Cathedral of St. James that should or is said to hold the remains of St. James. So this is a very typical path that's taken by, honestly, people of all walks of life from all over the world, and they can start it at any point of time. And along this path, on this Camino, there's towns, hotels, restaurants, you name it, that are all really there to support the pilgrims and kind of have this little thriving industry that's all surrounded by or supported by the people that are on the Camino. So Bierzo is right along that path. So there's quite a bit of religious historical significance in this area. So you'll find many cathedrals, both in perfect condition, some are in ruins, all along this area. Bierzo used to be an area also that was covered in vineyards, but more recently, a lot of those vineyards have been replaced with other types of crops, and it's seeing a resurgence because it is becoming a very iconic and important winemaking area right now. So it's seeing this big resurgence in about the last 20 years of this reinvigoration of winemaking being really a key industry of the Bierzo area. The terroir of Bierzo is very similar to what you would know of as green Spain. And green Spain is this whole northern part of Spain that is really influenced by the Atlantic, right? So it's Galicia, then Bierzo, which is part of Castilla y León. So that would just be that kind of gateway into it, as I said. Asturias, Cantabria, and the Basque region. So this is really one of the only areas of Spain that you will see grass stay green year round. Lots and lots of lush green trees and life like this. This is due to the amount of rain they get. They do get a heavier amount of rain and humidity and just this cool, wet wind that is constantly coming from the Atlantic Ocean. It also just doesn't have the extreme summer temperatures that the other parts of Spain experience. So the continental parts of Spain have that really brutal summertime temperatures, but they've got the big diurnal swing between day and night. And then your Mediterranean side of Spain has extreme summertime temperatures, but maybe a little softer, but they don't have that big swing. So they have this sort of kind of 24-hour warmth during that summertime. So those parts of Spain tend to not remain as green. So Galicia and those northern parts there that I described are just think of what you imagine when you think of Ireland or Scotland. If you've ever been to any of those areas, it's really similar. And in fact, that word Galicia, if you just take the last two letters off of the end, Galicia, take the IA off, you're left with the word Gaelic. This is a part of Spain that was really more known for its Celtic heritage than the rest of Spain that is much more known for perhaps its Arab heritage. So, and you see the remnants of that Gaelic heritage still to this day in many of in the crosses and all of the cathedrals and the style of what they eat and the people and the culture there, right down to bagpipes. It's like that's the instrument of choice for any type of celebration. So it really does have this strong Celtic heritage there. And Bierzo, although being part of Castile y Leon, as far as its political region, really does still hold on quite a bit to its Gaelic style from its neighbors over in Galicia. So with this territory, this beautiful, lush green part of Spain, it's not really the ideal area for making big, full-bodied red wines. You honestly just can't. But what they can produce is beautiful, minerally, really nice white wines, and then also lighter-bodied, perfumey, very delicate red wines. And that is what Bierzo is known for. It's actually about 75% red wine production to white wine production, which is the other 25%. And this has so much to do with that climate. So it is technically a continental climate. It's not close to the Atlantic Ocean, but it's still getting some of that maritime effect because you've got some of that ocean coming in, the last lingering effects of it kind of stretching all the way to Bierzo. And then, of course, there's the water just coming right over and rain and everything over the mountains from Asturias. So it gets maritime influences in a continental climate. So think of it as kind of continental with more water. So as opposed to something like Ribera del Duero, which is continental with almost drought. So this is really key for the terroir here. The soil here is also really special as well. This is one of those very few parts of Spain that has a big amount of slate. So different than Priorat, it's not quite that super fragile shale-like liquorella. This is a much more kind of softer version of slate, but it is on the steepest parts of their vineyards. You'll also find quite a bit of granite in other parts of Bierzo. And Galicia is really full of all these different striations of granite and slate all the way through to the coast. And then there's alluvial soils as well, because Bierzo is a bit in a valley. So you'll find all these like sedimentary rocks that do find their way. So there's a bit of diversity in the soils here. Ultimately, what this produces is medium to somewhat medium full-bodied red wines. They can have a lot of perfume coming out of them. So these are not neutral at all. Always Bierzo wines tend to be super floral, lots of ripe fruit and on that sort of fresh, almost crunchy style. And kind of like a little bit of tannin structure as well, but pretty delicate. That's That's the main signature of their terroir there. Mencia is the king grape of Bierzo, and it will definitely remain that way. There are other red grapes that are growing here that are local grapes. A little bit of foreign grapes growing here. And when I say foreign, I mean grapes that are from France. So you might find a touch of Cabernet and Merlot growing in some vineyards. It's super uncommon though. Mencia is really the varietal here. Now, I love saying that Mencia is sort of like Syrah and Pinot Noir if they had a baby and created a new varietal, which they very well may. So Mencia can have a lot of the color similar to Syrah. So when you look at Mencia, it can look pretty dark with lots of purple and fuchsia colors particularly when it's quite young. You know, Pinot Noir tends to be a little more light, and Mencia can be quite opaque sometimes. So it does have quite a bit of color potential, similar to Syrah. Also similar to Syrah, it can have a lot of that florality and even that sort of barnyard backbone, which is really common. But that earthiness is very much a line that you would also draw to Pinot Noir as well. So both Syrah and Pinot Noir show off quite a bit of earthy notes along with their fruity notes. I like to think of Syrah and Pinot Noir as well as Mencia as being red grapes that show off their terroir. Like, it depends on what it's growing in and what the conditions are and the vineyards and everything, but it really expresses where it grew and what that vintage was like. So similar to Pinot Noir, Mencia doesn't produce very high alcohol wines. It takes a lot of work in the vineyards to get it to do that. So in the past, Bierzo was known for trying to produce these more intense, higher alcohol wines, and it just wasn't natural for the area. But nowadays, what's really happened with kind of this new wave of winemaking style is showing how beautiful Bierzo can be in its more softer style, which is really around that 13.5, sometimes up to 14% alcohol. So it's like that kind of right there, medium body, but always delicate. You know, it shows off acidity. Tannins are rarely intense, just that they're always usually quite soft. And Mencia is so delicious when you have it young. It does oxidize pretty easily. So while I have had plenty of Bierzo wines that age, and they can be gorgeous when they're aged, it's really, I think it shows off its most signature style when you have them when they're young, just a few years after the vintage, when you're really just getting all those beautiful primary fruit and flower aromas and flavors. Some of the other grapes of the area, which you'll often find blended in, are local varieties. So Maranzao is an example of one of those grapes. Sousson is an example of a grape from this area. Let's see, Emily, what else is here?
Kindo, Espadero.
Espadero, yeah, these are really hard to say grapes. and it has a lot to do with, they share these grapes with neighboring Portugal. So you'll find that many of the grapes that grow in Bierzo are just really prevalent in Portugal, particularly in that northern part. There's also some beautiful white varietals that grow here, and the most important one is Godello. Godello is perhaps a real signature white grape of several Galician regions, and in Bierzo, it's definitely the white varietal here. Godello is compared to Albarino a lot because Albarino is from Rías Baixas, and they kind of share the lion's share of white wine production of Galicia. Albarino, where it can be very, very aromatic and floral and just a whole fruit basket of fruit flavors. Godello is a little more subtle, tends to be more mineral, a little bit of florality, citrusy, but Godello has lots of silkiness. It can have a little bit more texture and glycerin level in the wine. So I find that Godello is really nice for fuller bodied white wines. A lot of producers making wines with Godello are making sort of like a Burgundy style. So they do find that it does well in oak aging. Well, we're here to talk about the iconic reds, right? So Mencia is the grape that we're going to focus on for this tasting. The winemaking style of Bierzo tends to be a little more hands-off. Mencia is a varietal that, much like I was saying that it shows off its terroir, it also shows off its vessel quite a bit as well. And many of the producers here are very careful with their oak aging. Different than other parts of Spain that really introduce oak barrels in an almost extreme way, because one, perhaps the varietals really just require that extra time to age and soften out and aren't really permeable by the oak. Mencia is quite different. It really takes on the flavor of the barrels quite a bit and can easily become a wine that's too oaky. So producers are often using oak barrels in a pretty soft way. You'll find that many of the wineries here do not use brand new oak barrels. So they may only use a little bit of new oak, maybe for their oldest vineyards, but oftentimes they really employ those second and third year use barrels so that the oak intensity has sort of pulled out of the barrels. They still get all the micro oxygenation that they can get from the barrels, but with less of that oak spice, flavor, and the vanilla and everything that oak often puts into the wine, so that you can still hold on to those primary aromas that Mencia has. So 6 months of oak aging is really common for a lot of the Mencia wines, and 1 year is usually the maximum that many of these wines will age for in their barrels. And then again, having some time in bottle is really key. Something that's interesting about Mencia is that it is a varietal that can be a touch reductive. So this means that it can have an aroma that is sometimes, it's compared to being like sulfur, but it's not that you're smelling sulfur in the wine necessarily. It's that the wine is the opposite of oxidized. So instead of being affected by oxygen, it's being so unaffected by oxygen that it's making the aromas a bit disjointed. So Mencia does need some time to rest, both perhaps a short amount of time in barrel to introduce some oxygen, but also in the bottle where it has that little bit of oxygen that can just sort of slowly integrate into the wine. Otherwise, when you have a wine that's super, super fresh and young Mencia, you should 100% expect that reductive aroma and flavor. And it's just part of the experience. And it does blow off usually, within a few minutes. Winemaking is hard to talk about without talking about really the most influential winemaker in the area of Bierzo, and that's Raul Perez. So Raul is not only important to Bierzo, he's important to, I don't know a region in Spain he doesn't make his way into. And in fact, he's now goes to Portugal and he's everywhere, this guy. But Bierzo is really his home. And this is where he started a name for himself, and I guess started that beard. So, which he is also very famous for. Raul has really put his signature on the area, and he has reintroduced classic techniques in order to make wines with just soul, just truly soulful and inspiring wines. He doesn't have a formula. He definitely has a style. He has ways that he likes to make wines, but a formula or a recipe, that's definitely not him. He is 100% inspired by the vineyards and what the vineyards want to produce. He farms organically, often biodynamically, and uses pretty classic to kind of ancient winemaking methods. And one thing that he's most known for is whole cluster. So anytime you see wines from Raul, he will try to use in some amount whole cluster in there. And it's because he loves the introduction of how stems can add even more florality and nuance and spice and paprika and all of these just like beautiful aromas and flavors that you don't normally find without the stem. It takes very careful winemaking to use stems in the macerations. So he's known for this, and he's also just known for being a great guy. So there's many winemakers around Spain that are influenced by Raul. He's not a professor, but in many ways he is the teacher of how to make these just sort of old-fashioned, beautiful, soulful wines. So you'll see the reaches of Raul's influence in Madrid with the Sierra de Gredos wines there, in Priorat, in Rioja. I mean, he really has, he really loves to share what he does. And I think that's part of what makes everyone love and respect him, is it's not just that the wines that he produces are so incredible, but it's his willingness to see Spain become the next level, the next best wines to explore and to collect and to really educate yourself on.
So to finish up our conversation on Bierzo, we're going to taste a wine from Bierzo. Pour myself a little in the glass here. Today we're having Pétalos, which is 100% Mencia. It is reductive. Super reductive. Expected. Got it. So the vintage that we're tasting today is 2018, so a beautiful, young, fresh Mencia. The color here is sort of a beautiful curranty purple that sort of fades to a almost clear fuchsia-y purple on the rim. It's got some concentration in the center, but it's pretty light in color. It blew off really fast. It's super aromatic. It smells like berries. It's got like every kind of berry you could think of. Really bright, fresh raspberry, strawberry, blackberry.
Emily, do you think this wine is typical of any Bierzo Mencia? So if someone was drinking another one.
Yeah, really any. It's very typical. Beyond that berry fruit, it has this very classic florality that you expect from Mencia from Bierzo. This violet, purple flowers, and this sort of like bright, crunchy, fresh, high-toned red fruit is exactly what you would expect from any Mencia. All those berries on the palate as well. It's also pretty herby. It has all of those floral qualities, but has a nice herbal quality to it as well. Almost like a minerality on the palate. It's got sort of like a dark slate mineral. The tannins are there, but pretty light. It's really all about juicy, fresh fruit. This would be great for somebody who likes Pinot Noir. It would be perfect for if you like the wines of the Northern Rhone. There's some real spice. There's this almost animal quality to it that is really reminiscent of those wines. This is great for somebody who's looking for a light to medium bodied wine that has sort of bright, fresh fruit that would really go with any style of food, particularly like springtime dishes that are coming out right now. This would be lovely with vegetable dishes or salads. I would drink this anytime.
Got a question for you.
Shoot.
Do you think, out of all the iconic reds that you can think of Spain, is Bierzo significantly different?
Yeah. The truth is, Spain has a real classic style. And for a long time, it was known for big, bold, full-bodied reds. And this is sort of the opposite of that. This is light and crisp and crunchy, and it has the opposite style that you would expect from the most of central Spain. So it's got sort of this refreshing change.